Good morning, LA Larkin, and welcome to Arts Canvas.
Oh, yes, well, it's lovely to be with you. Thank you for having me on your show.
Well, you're yet another author whose best laid plans for launching a fabulous new book have been scuttled by COVID-19. And your latest novel in your series of Olivia Wolfe adventures is called Prey. And we'd like to know how you've been going about actually promoting it.
Well, it's been a really interesting journey. I had a lot of events lined up. A book launch organised in a bookshop, lots of speaking events. I was going to travel around the country. I have a publisher here, Clandestine Press, but I also have a publisher in the UK, and I was going to go over there and help promote it there. And, of course, couldn't do any of it. And that's when I think a lot of authors like myself had to really sit back and think, well, what do we do now? What I found is that I did a virtual book launch on Facebook Live. I was very nervous because it was the first one I'd ever done. But it was really good fun, and I had a turnout probably, in fact, almost certainly bigger than I would have done if I'd had an event in a bookshop. And people from different countries in the world came. So I had somebody from Spain and France and somebody from Ireland and Scotland, as well as a lot of people from here. And so that sort of made me think, wow, in many ways, being forced to do things virtually has made us perhaps a little bit more inventive. And I know that bloggers particularly and other authors, people like yourself, Karena, have been fantastic for wanting to help the authors that are actually mad enough perhaps to launch a book during a global pandemic. Because a lot of author friends of mine who are launching at this time have postponed their launches, and they are having their books come out, they hope, sort of September, October, November time. And so that's going to be very interesting as to whether there'll be suddenly this sort of splurge of new books all coming out at the same time. Which is the right decision? Is the right decision, as I hope, to have continued and bring the book out in April, because it only came out last week, Prey, or are the authors who postponed it, have they done the right thing? And I think only time will tell.
Well, speaking from a reader's point of view, we're happy that a lot of you are going ahead because it gives us something to read while we're all sitting here at home.
Well, you see, that was one of the things I was thinking about. I was thinking, well, look, people are stuck at home, and yes, they can potter around the house, they can do a bit of gardening if they're lucky to have a garden, and, there are movies and the social media, but then there are books. And, one of the things that I love about books, and particularly about thrillers, and that's why I write them, is because they're an escapist read. They take you off on an adventure into a whole different world, and you can forget the reality of the pandemic that's going on here now, and, the isolation at home and sort of feeling probably a bit trapped, as most people are. And you can go off an adventure, say, with Olivia Wolfe, who is the central character to Prey, and you can forget all about it, and you can live her dramas and excitements and ordeals, but from the safety of your own armchair.
Well, I think you want to be in the safety of your own armchair because Olivia gets into some very hot water in South Africa, in particularly with the poaching of rhinos. And you went to South Africa to research all this, didn't you? How did that go about?
So I've been a big conservationist, animal conservationist for many, many years. And I'm also, I love South Africa. I travelled through South Africa many years ago when I was backpacking, and I travelled through 8 countries in Africa as a backpacker with a tent, and completely fell in love with South Africa and the animals and the beauty of the countryside. The thing about South Africa is that it's also going through huge changes still. There are a lot of issues and difficulties going on in the country, and there are also a lot of criminal syndicates that operate in South Africa, and that could be anything from still, so unsurprisingly, blood diamonds are still going through South Africa. People smuggling, drugs. A lot of drugs get transported out of South Africa and end up in various markets around the world. But one of the ones that really, really sort of, I suppose, broke my heart was the illegal wildlife trade, and particularly the trade in rhino horn, because the white rhino in South Africa, where the largest population in the world is in terrible danger of extinction. And so I wanted to somehow create a thriller that was focused on the criminal syndicates themselves, and set it in South Africa, and try and get across the danger and the military-style operations that actually these criminal syndicates operate. It really stunned me, and so I spent time in Johannesburg, also in Soweto, because Soweto plays a very important part in the book. And it's one of the big mysteries of the book, which is why a senior government person, a very senior government person, has an offshore bank account, a secret offshore bank account with millions in it, with a poor teacher from Soweto, from South Africa. And it doesn't make sense. And that's what sets Olivia Wolf off. And she travels to South Africa and she starts sniffing around. And the problem is, of course, she starts sniffing around and the criminal syndicates know what she's doing. And so she's on a collision course with them, and that leads to all sorts of trouble.
It certainly does. And this is the third Olivia Wolf adventure too. We should mention there's two others, isn't there?
Oh, no, it's the second. Ooh. Yeah, sorry. No, it is the second one. Although what I would say is that I very deliberately wrote Prey as if it were a standalone. So whilst it does have Olivia Wolf and a couple of the other characters like Vitaly Yoshkov, the Russian is he or isn't he a spy character, they're there, but I really wanted to make it so that newcomers to my books didn't feel, oh, look, this won't make sense to me, what's the point of reading it? I wanted them to feel fully engaged with Olivia and her, adventure to try and uncover who these criminal syndicates are, without, and feel comfortable about doing it. So, yes, it is the second book, but as I said, it's open to newcomers to my work to hopefully enjoy.
Well, now let's get down to the thing about writing thrillers, because as you say, you've chosen this as a medium because you love a good read yourself, and you feel that thrillers are something that people can pick up easily and then get completely engrossed in. Now, how many female thriller writers are there actually in Australia, apart from yourself?
Well, now that's very interesting. I belong to Sisters in Crime, and if your listeners don't know that, perhaps what that is an organisation in Australia that encourages and supports female crime fiction writers, and that includes me, because I write thrillers. We have wonderful, wonderful female writers who write detective-based, investigative, mystery fiction. We have some thriller writers who are female, some, not that many, and it's really interesting. I mean, Candice Fox is an obvious one, who has obviously internationally done, absolutely brilliantly. There are some others, but, as I said, not an awful lot of us, because we tend to write about sort of very, high stakes, fast paced. There's more action in it. There's more adventure in it. There's very high danger and mounting danger to the central character throughout the book, and they're often set in sort of international locations, which can add a whole degree of danger and excitement in itself. So, for instance, part of the book happens at night in a wildlife reserve in South Africa. Now, even people who've lived their whole lives in South Africa would find that very terrifying. But for someone like Olivia, who isn't a native to that country, it's totally terrifying. Also add to that the fact that she's being chased by an assassin, which, hey, that's not good. So, look, I like thrillers because I like it because there's an emotional roller coaster ride when you read them. They really sort of move you, I hope. Well, they do me when I'm reading it. And, you get these moments of elation, you get the moments of fear, you get moments of, oh, no, please don't do that. You get, there's a big mystery that you're going, oh, no, what does that mean? There's that sort of real emotional roller coaster ride, and that's, for me, what I love about writing them and also what I love about reading them.
Well, you love writing them because you get to pull all the strings. The rest of us just sit there thinking, goodness, what's going to happen next?
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. And in fact, it's much safer being the author because I have formulated the whole plan in my head. So, when something really scary happens, I'm not jumping out of my chair, although I did have... there were a couple of people who've read Prey who came back to me and went, oh, my gosh, I was reading this late at night, and honestly, I was so scared by the end of it that I had to go and read a cozy mystery because I had to read something afterwards that would calm me down. And I was like, oh, boy, there you go. Well, I succeeded, I suppose.
You did. No greater recommendation does an author need than that, I think.
Well, yes, as long as I haven't scared them too much, which, I don't think I have. There's a whole range of, scenes in this book from obviously the scary because it's a thriller to the touching to the moving. There's a whole range.
It sounds fantastic, and we've been talking to L.A. Larkin about her latest book, which is called Prey. It's set in South Africa, and it's in all good bookstores right this moment, I suggest, if you can actually get to a good bookstore, and otherwise you can find it online at all online bookstores as well. And thanks for talking to us this morning, Louisa.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been lovely.